For our guests, the League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that has worked since the 1930s in Denver and 1920 nationally after women received the vote to improve our system of government and impact public policy through voter education and advocacy. With 23 ballot issues, this is an excellent time for voter education. We also advocate for issues, and our positions on the ballot issues can be found on our website. Before I hand this over to Jeanette Scotland from Voter Service to introduce our speaker, a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, please join us next week, Monday, October 12th, same time, same BAT channel, for a briefing on the Denver issues. We're doing the Colorado issues today. Join us in a very similar way by a link on our website. Here is our agenda for tonight. Introductions and announcements right now. Jerry Cummins will be speaking about the ballot issues, and then we'll do the positions as well. I also wanted to let you know we've muted everyone so we can all hear our speakers clearly. Please use the chat feature to ask questions during the talk, and I'll present the questions to our speaker at the end. I'm going to put a message in the chat right now so that you can see where it is and how to use it. So please put all your questions there, and I'll be monitoring as we go along. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeanette Scotland. And Andrea, we can still hear everyone coming in. I don't know if you can, the bells.
I don't know how to fix that.
Maybe if you just mute yourself for a bit.
Oh, that would help. Thank you.
All right, Jeanette, take it away.
All right. Welcome, everyone. This is a wonderful event, and I am really honored to be able to introduce Jerry Cummins. She is a star within the League, and she has a great deal of knowledge about the way that voter service runs in our state. She is a resident currently of Nob Hill, Ridgeview Hills South in Centennial, and she serves on the Civic Association. Her past service to Centennial was that she was the city clerk there for several years. And then she has a lot of service in the League. She joined somewhere around the Watergate incident, and she quickly became involved in the League. And by 1983, she was a director on the state board, and she has been a member ever since, and which is really quite an honor because you have to do a lot of work when you're a member of the State Board of League of Women Voters in Colorado. And then, so she's also been the past president twice. When we have new people who are trying to learn the ropes on voter service, Jerry is a fantastic mentor. She just does a terrific job. One thing she left off her resume is that she is a parliamentarian also, and you really need these people to be on top of things when you have a meeting when there's some important voting going on. I'm sure the members of Congress know that. And she's not just a, a voter service nerd, because she came to Colorado from Washington State. She was a piano teacher, and she's been an organist in the church for over 40 years. She's been married for over 50 years to the same man, and she has 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. And she's just delightful. She also serves her community with the Meals on Wheels. And so I'm really thrilled to have Jerry, who will talk to us about each of the different voting, the ballots, and then she's going to have questions. So Jerry, take it away.
Well, hello, everyone. And Jeanette, thanks for that introduction. I'll try to live up to that in some fashion tonight. It's great to see so many people here. I see we have 74 participants this evening, and it sounds like everybody's getting ready to vote. And as you all know, the ballots will go into the mail on Friday, October 9th. So stand by, watch your mail, grab your ballot and grab a pen and go for it. Also, one quick announcement, a public service announcement. Most of you are familiar with Vote 411. That is the online voters guide and directory for candidates and issues that is sponsored by the State League with the input from local leagues across the state. The LWV US is the primary host of the software, and issues around this country are placed on that website. Megan Brown, who is the director and the coordinator for Vote 411 at the national level, just happens to live here in Boulder. So we can take advantage of her skills and input along the way. It went live on Saturday. I checked mine out, and most of my candidates have responded. So if you have people wondering where they need to go to find information on the candidates, vote411.org is an excellent resource. So let's get started with some ballot issues at the state level. Many of you know that the League of Women Voters has been doing the ballot issues pro and con information since 1936. They've been doing each of the ballot issues on every statewide election since that time. We all need to understand that the pro and con arguments published by the League are not the opinions or endorsements of the League, but rather they are the arguments from the individuals and groups who have submitted those arguments. I'm going to hold up the copy of the ballot issues. You can probably pick it up maybe. That should be, it should be somewhere in your league. Check it out. Another way to find out more in-depth information about the ballot issues is through the Blue Book. It's the legislative analysis of all the ballot issues that comes out and is published by Legislative Council. It was mailed to all active registered households, and I hope that you have all received your copy. And in that copy, you will also find information about the judges. It is in the back portion of the Blue Book. Okay, so how do issues get on the ballot? How are they placed on the ballot? Well, ballot issues are either referendums or initiatives, and I'll talk about the referendums first. This is a proposal from the Colorado legislature, having received at least a majority of the members of each house of the Colorado General Assembly in case of statutory changes, and at least 2/3 of the members of each house in the case of constitutional amendments. Now, the initiatives, this has been a right of Colorado residents since 1910, I should say citizens. They have the right to place a citizens initiative on the ballot. And for a proposed ballot measure to make the ballot by petition, the signature requirement is 5% of the total number of votes cast for Secretary of State in the last election. That number is 124,632 valid registered voter signatures. Most petitioning groups will get substantially more simply because not everything will always be accurate, and people change their address and so on and so forth. So they usually get more in order to qualify for the ballot. Those issues can be of two types. They can be propositions, or they can be constitutional amendments. Constitutional amendments are referred to the voters in one of two ways, either from the Colorado legislature, having gained 2/3 of the vote in both houses of the General Assembly, or initiated by citizens by gathering the required number of signatures, which we have discussed. Only voters, not the legislature, may change the Colorado Constitution. And you should be aware that any ballot measure that changes the Constitution are long-lasting and frequently impact the functioning of the General Assembly. All amendments on the ballot are constitutional proposals, and that means that only the voters can change them should they be approved. Propositions approved by the voters may be changed by the legislature. I want to go over just a quick note about the constitutional amendments. You may remember in 2016 that voters approved a measure that constitutional measures were required to receive 55% of the vote to pass. On the 2020 ballot, those measures needing 55% to pass are Amendment C and Amendment 76, and we'll go over those in a bit. Because Amendment B is the repeal of constitutional language, and underline that word repeal, it only needs a simple majority to pass. Amendment 77 likewise only needs a simple majority of the votes because it removes certain language from the Constitution to the statutes. Okay, and then you'll notice that many of these are identified either by a letter or a number or amendment or a proposition. One easy way to remember the distinction is that amendments go in the Constitution, propositions are simply laws. If it has an alphabetical letter after it, it came from the legislature. If it has a number after it, it came from a citizen's initiative. So I hope you might find that helpful. As we've discussed, all propositions need only a simple majority to pass. So let's go on and start with Amendment B. This is the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment that deals with property taxes. This is a referred amendment from the legislature to amend the Colorado Constitution to repeal that amendment. Major provisions are that it repeals the constitutional provision that requires residential property tax assessment rates equal to 45% and non-residential property tax rates equal 55% of the total share of state property taxes. Its second major provision is that it repeals the requirement that the non-residential property tax assessment rate be fixed at 29%. And lastly, it repeals the requirement that the General Assembly adjust the residential assessment rate in order to maintain the 45 to 55% ratio of residential to non-residential property taxes. Let's talk a little bit of background about Amendment B and Gallagher. In 1982, voters added the Gallagher Amendment to the state constitution in order to provide ongoing property tax relief to residential property owners. This constitutional provision required that residential property taxes could make up no more than 45% of the state property tax base. Non-residential property owners are responsible for the remaining 55% of state property taxes. The Colorado General Assembly is responsible for adjusting the residential assessments so that this 45 to 55% ratio is maintained. When the proposal was adopted in 1982, the residential assessment rate was 21%. Because residential property values have increased faster than business property values, the General Assembly has reduced over time the residential assessment rate in order to maintain the 45-55 split. Today, the residential property tax assessment rate has dropped to 7.15%, while the non-residential rate is still fixed at the constitutionally required 29%. If the Gallagher Amendment is not repealed, residential property tax assessment rates will again be reduced in 2021. Well, what do property taxes fund? They fund local public schools, fire and police departments, hospital districts, city and county government, and other services. Property taxes are paid by homeowners and non-residential property owners like businesses, farmers, and oil and gas operators. Property taxes paid by a property owner are dependent on three things. One, the actual property value. Two, the applicable assessment rate. And three, the tax rate or mill levy. Changes to any of these three components impact the amount of property taxes paid, and thus the amount of revenue collected by a local government. Because of the requirement for voters to approve all tax increases, voters are often reluctant to approve those increases. Local governments no longer have the means to make up for that lost property tax revenue when property tax rates fall. If voters repeal the Gallagher Amendment in November, companion legislation, Senate Bill 223 would take effect, preventing the legislature from changing property assessment rates for 4 years and freezing residential tax rates at 7.15% and non-residential rates at 29%. This bill only takes effect if voters statewide approve the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. And we'll take a pause here and we'll have Pearl Ann bring us some questions.
I don't have any questions yet, so please put questions into the chat. Or if there's only a couple, we could unmute too.
Just about everybody always wants to know, what is this going to do to my personal property tax? And I'm going to repeat the 3 elements that influence that. One is the actual value of your property, which is, as you know, going up. And number 2, the applicable assessment rate. And 3, the tax rate or mill levy. And I know that there are a number of local jurisdictions that have mill levy questions on the ballot. So right there, there's a.
Trying to get it louder.
Okay.
A couple, someone asked if it undoes Tabor to some degree.
Say that again, please.
Sorry, does it undo Tabor
No,
to some degree?
no, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And what does this mean for schools that cut budgets again this year?
Hopefully, they will have a base level that they can work from rather than have declining property tax revenues coming in.
And will there be a large increase in the residential rates after 4 years of guarantee?
If I had a crystal ball, I could probably answer that, but I don't. And I cannot foresee that. And again, I'm going to go back to those 3 items that we mentioned before: the value of your property, the applicable assessment rate, that is if voters change something in there, and the tax rate in your jurisdiction or the mill levy. So conceivably, yes, conceivably it'll stay the same, but nothing ever stays the same in my lifetime. So stand by for change.
Any other questions? I think that's the ones we've gotten, Jerry.
All right, let's go on to Amendment C. This is conduct of charitable gaming activities. This proposal came from the legislature and allows bingo and raffle licensees to hire managers and operators of games of chance. And it reduces the required period of existence for a charitable organization to obtain a bingo raffle license from 5 years to 3 years. It's a pretty simple one. Oh, I see a question has come in. Well, let's finish C before we pick up that other question. Okay, a little background on this one. In 1958, the Colorado Constitution was amended to allow games of chance such as bingo and raffle. Currently, nonprofit organizations with bingo and raffle licenses are required to conduct those games with only volunteer members from the organization. Before the nonprofit organization can apply for a raffle or bingo license, it must have been in continuous operation or existence for 5 years and submit other pertinent information. This proposal limits payment to a hired manager or operator to no more than the minimum wage. The proceeds of the game must be directed to the specific purposes of the nonprofit organization conducting the game. Fiscal revenue estimates that beginning in state budget year 2021, Amendment C could increase state revenue by about $5,000 per year as a result of additional application and renewal fees for bingo raffle license, based on an assumption of approximately 50 new applicants paying the current fee of $100. So let's take questions on this one first, and then I see we have a couple of other questions back on Amendment B. So questions on B, or C, pardon me. And this is one that needs 55% to pass.
Any questions?
Pearl-Ann, there are a couple questions back on the Gallagher Amendment.
Right. Jerry
Okay.
was hoping to finish C first and then go back to those B ones.
Oh, okay.
All right, I guess we're on B, Jerry. Do you
All
want,
right,
do you want me to read them, or do you see them?
go ahead and read them.
Okay, how does the residential, she doesn't understand, doesn't understand how the residential rate is 7.5% and the non-residential rate is 29%, and how that relates to the 45-55 ratio. And then Jackie has, it's my understanding 45-55 refers to the total tax revenues taken in by the state each year. And then because there's more residential properties than commercial properties, that comes out to a residential rate of 7.5%.
Okay.
I think it's confusion between those two percentages,
Yeah.
two sets of percentages.
The 45-55% rate is based on the whole state, not just your area, but the whole, when they look at all the sums of the property tax that have come in, 45% across the entire state has to come from residential. 55% of the total property tax then has to come from commercial or non-residential as it's described. I don't know if that's helps or not. And what is the difference between a mill levy and an applicable assessment rate? Not sure I can answer that one well. The assessment rate is the one that the county assessor, at least in my county, compiles and gives you that assessment rate. The tax rate is the rate that's applied to that assessment.
And then someone asked, said that the legislature referred B, which means they recommend that we pass it. Is that correct?
Yes, it was a pretty broad bipartisan vote. I meant to look that up earlier, but it was around 80% of the legislature that voted to send it to the ballot.
And what parts of the state would benefit by this repeal?
Right now, the rural areas of the state do not have the commercial tax base to bring up the property tax so that they can fund their services for fire, water, sewer. I know there's a mosquito district somewhere on the West Slope. There's a cemetery district. There's library districts. Rural areas just don't have the commercial tax base that the larger urban areas along the Front Range do. So I don't know if that answers the question. It might give them a chance to stay stable at this point on a level playing field.
And the participants are helping each other, which is great. Someone said that page 9 defines mill levy. Any more questions on B? Because there's a couple of C ones coming in now.
The Blue Book is an excellent resource on Amendment B. So I would encourage you to go through that one. Are we done with B?
It looks like we're done with B.
Okay, let's go on and take the C ones.
Okay, do you think C will increase overall applicants and expand bingo or raffles by various charitable groups? And then the rest of the question is, I understand getting a permit to conduct a raffle is difficult. Will this change make raffles easier? Like, could groups like us be able to run a raffle?
On the other board that I served for Meals on Wheels, I was, quote, the raffle chair. So I know a little bit about this. But When we filed for a raffle license, we had to have been in existence for at least 5 years. We had to submit things like bylaws. It requires that any revenue or proceeds taken in on the raffle had to be set up with a separate bank account. Reports had to be filed with the Secretary of State quarterly, and on and on and on. So I don't know whether that's hard or whether that's easy. It was done. As far, what this does is allow people or allow groups that have been in existence for only 3 years to apply for a raffle or a bingo license. So that sort of expands the pool of nonprofits. I don't know how many nonprofits are coming online that are only 3 years old. But you might think about that in your own community and see how that works.
And then are there specific groups or organizations opposed to C, Amendment C?
You know, I haven't found any.
Any more questions on C? I think that's it then.
Okay, let's go to Amendment 76. Citizen qualifications of electors. This is a citizen initiative to change certain language pertaining to voting in the Colorado Constitution. It has 2 major provisions. It changes the language from every citizen to only a citizen of the United States. And it requires voters to be 18 years of age. A little bit of background. The eligibility requirements for voting in Colorado elections are stated in the Colorado Constitution and state law. Under current law, a U.S. citizen who is 18 years of age, has lived in the state for 22 days before an election, and has registered to vote may vote in all elections. While the Colorado Constitution guarantees the vote to, quote, every citizen, unquote, it does not prohibit extension of voting eligibility to person under 18 years of age or to non-citizens. Since 2019, state law allows 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections if they will be 18 years old by the time of the general election. It is unclear that if the measure passes, whether cities or towns with their own home rule charter would be free to establish their own criteria for voter eligibility regarding municipal elections. Ultimately, the courts may have to determine how the measure would be applied in home rule cities and towns. The proposed Amendment 76, if passed, will not affect the citizenship, residency, or voter registration requirements of current law, but it will prohibit eligibility for the 17-year-olds who are now able to vote in primary elections. Okay, questions about voting on this one?
And there's definitely questions on this. So first of all, shouldn't it read every eligible citizen if we were going to make a change? I think that might be a grammar change.
I'm
So
not sure how you're interpreting eligible citizen, because a citizen is a citizen.
true.
Therefore, they're all eligible.
And who's funding 76? Do we know?
It was brought to the ballot by 2 people from Jefferson County. It's being endorsed by, I believe, the Americans for Prosperity, although they tend to focus more on tax questions.
If I am a citizen of the US and also a citizen of a foreign country, am I prohibited from voting in the US by the word only?
I don't believe so, because if you are a citizen of the United States, you are a citizen of the United States. And the first question on the voter registration form is, are you a citizen of the United States? Yes or no? So obviously you're going to check yes, because you are in fact a citizen.
What is this supposed to achieve? Amendment 76.
Well, what it does is take away the 17-year-olds' right to vote. And I think the people who had drafted this proposal were also looking at the possibility that non-citizens could vote at some point if that law was changed someday. Right now, it just says every citizen, but it doesn't prohibit non-citizens. It does not specifically state non-citizens.
Does this also exclude voters that are pre-registered when they're 16?
I don't believe so, because they still have to be 18 to vote in a general election.
How many 17-year-olds voted in the last primary? Do we have some sense of that?
I think well, it's been a while. It's been a whole 3 months since the primary. I think I remember seeing a total of like 4,000 or 5,000 statewide.
And are there any estimates on how much defending this will cost Colorado taxpayers? I assume that means if there's lawsuits.
With some lawsuits. I haven't looked whether, I don't know whether the blue book covers that or not. If somebody's got a blue book and wants to check on that and chime in, why I'm open to that, just put it in the chat box. Every one of the ballot issues in the blue book is required to do a fiscal impact statement or have a fiscal impact statement.
Yes, apparently on page 19 in the blue book.
No impact. Okay. Thank you to whoever looked that up. Appreciate it. Okay.
That's the last of those questions.
And this is one that will require 55% of the vote to pass. So, all right, let's go on to Amendment 77. Local voter approval of casino bet limits and games. This proposal is to change the Colorado Constitution and change the Colorado Revised Statutes concerning voter-approved changes to limit gaming in Central City, Black Hawk, and Cripple Creek. It is a citizens' initiative. It amends the state constitution to provide for local elections in the 3 above named towns to revise limits that apply to gaming. It authorizes voters in the same cities to increase the amount of single bet limits above $100 and to approve additional casino games. And amends the state law regarding casino tax revenue to allow money to go to programs to improve community college student retention and increase credentials completion. In addition to the current supplement.
Next slide.
Pardon me?
There it is. Thank you.
And increase credentials completion, in addition to the current supplement for student financial aid and classroom instruction programs. Well, a little background on this. In 2008, Colorado voters approved a change in the state constitution to allow bet limits of $100 on casino gambling in the cities of Central City, Black Hawk, and Cripple Creek. They also approved adding the games of roulette and craps to those games, which were originally allowed in 1990, which were slot machines and the card games of blackjack and poker. Under current law, 78% of the tax revenues from gaming is distributed to the state's public community colleges, junior colleges, and local district colleges to supplement existing state funding for student financial aid and classroom instruction programs. This ballot initiative would expand uses of this revenue to include programs to improve student retention and degree completion programs. If this measure passes, casino bet limits and restrictions on the types of casino games will be removed from the Constitution and placed in the statutes. The Colorado Gaming Commission will write the rules for any new games, and casinos may begin the new games and new bet limits on May 1st of 2021. Questions?
I don't see any yet. There's a little chat still on 76, but no questions for 77.
And again, that was the local voter approval of casino bet limits and games. That's the voters in the three casino towns. All righty, well, let's go on to propositions.
Or there is one more on 77. Who's in favor of this? And what is the difference between community colleges and junior colleges for 77?
Beats me on the last one, between community colleges and junior colleges. Maybe somebody knows. Who is supporting this? This is brought to you by the casinos in Black Hawk, Cripple Creek. And I've spaced the other one, Black Hawk Central City.
Right, I think we can go on now.
Okay,
I have a question. Can you hear my voice?
yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is about the casinos on the Indian reservations. They're governed by the federal government, right?
As far as I know, this does not apply to them.
I know it doesn't, that says that. And I thought, well, that's probably the reason is that the federal government governs gambling on the Indian reservations. No?
Bobby's shaking her head no.
No, the Indians are sovereign tribes, which means that their laws are within their own tribal councils. The federal government does not have any say about those laws. It's about casinos.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay, propositions.
Jerry, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Okay, let's start over on proposition EE. And because this is an alphabetical identification, this comes to us from the legislature. All legislative items are alphabetical. This pertains to cigarette, tobacco, and nicotine products tax. It comes to us from the legislature, as we stated, and it increases taxes on cigarettes and tobacco products. It creates a new tax on nicotine or vaping products and authorizes the new tax revenue to be spent on expanded preschool programs, K-12 education, affordable housing, eviction legal assistance, tobacco prevention, healthcare, and general state spending. Little background. This measure would gradually increase taxes on cigarettes from the current 84 cents per pack to $2.64 by July of 2027. It would gradually impose a new tax on nicotine products, such as vaping devices and e-cigarettes over the next 7 years. Cigarettes are currently taxed in Colorado at a statutory rate of 20 cents per pack or 1 cent per cigarette. In 2004, Amendment 35 authorized an additional constitutional tax of 64 cents per pack or 3.2 cents per cigarette for a total state levied cigarette tax of 84 cents. Proposition EE would incrementally increase the statutory cigarette tax rate to $2 per pack. That is 10 cents per cigarette by July of 2027, increasing the total state levied cigarette tax to $2.64 per pack. Colorado currently taxes tobacco products, that is cigars and tobacco designed to be chewed or smoked in a pipe, at a statutory rate of 20% of the manufacturer's list price, that is MLP, and a constitutional rate of 20% of the MLP for a total rate of 40% of the MLP. This measure would incrementally raise the statutory tax rate to 42% by July of 2027 for a new total tobacco products tax rate of 62% of the manufacturer's list price. While nicotine products such as e-cigarettes are currently not taxed in Colorado, this ballot measure would create a tax on nicotine products that would match other tobacco products' tax rates. The rate would begin at 30% of the MLP in 2021 and would increase gradually to 62% of MLP by July of 2027. During the first 3 years after passage, funding would be directed to the state's general fund and primarily used for K-12 education, rural schools, affordable housing, housing development, and eviction and legal assistance. Revenue would subsequently be dedicated to health and education programs, including expanded preschool programs, which will receive the primary funding, tobacco education, healthcare, and general state spending. The new revenue would be used to offer at least 10 hours per week of free preschool to every child in their final year before starting kindergarten, beginning in the 2023-24 school year. So that's it on Proposition EE, or double E.
So a question, how much is this expected to generate in money for the full period?
You know, I have not looked that up in the blue book. If somebody's got it handy.
And then would this gradually also increase the cost of these products?
I would assume that yes, that would.
We have a comment in that the Colorado chapter of the American Cancer Society was strongly endorsing EE at the meeting last week. And a comment that
Yeah, there were a group of stakeholders that sat down at the Capitol or wherever they met and met with legislators before this was drafted to see what they could agree on. It did include one major tobacco company.
So further tax low income people addicted instead of raising taxes on others, the question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure, of course. So this would be further taxing low income people addicted instead of raising taxes on others.
It would be on the users of the product, yes.
Okay. An answer to the Blue Book, page 26, 175.6 expected.
Is that in the first year or ongoing?
Michelle would have to answer that. I don't know.
Because it's a incrementally increasing tax.
Oh, here it is, 175 mil for 23 to 24, 2023 to 2024.
Okay.
Is the legislature the director of where and how much of the funding will be directed to all of these programs?
Well, they wrote the bill.
And yes, that was for the first year. Let's see, are there other
I
questions?
don't think I've seen a breakout.
There's other comments in the chat if everyone would like to look at those. If the objective of this measure is to discourage people from smoking, how is this going to help schools in the long run? The general public will think our school funding problems are solved and continue to vote down any increase in taxes for schools.
That is an argument that you can consider. I wouldn't hesitate to answer what people will think, but.
Apparently the breakout is on page 27. There's a comment here. I have a policy of not supporting FB advertisers until FB has a policy of taking down posts that are proven to be false. So I think that's Facebook. I don't know. Any other questions? All right.
Okay. Let's go on to Proposition 113, the national popular vote. And I know that many of you are familiar with this one. It is technically referred to in the Blue Book as a referendum petition. It seeks voter approval of previous legislation on the national popular vote interstate compact. The major provisions, it amends Colorado statutes to allow Colorado to enter into an agreement among states to elect the President of the United States by national popular vote. And it takes effect when states with enough electoral votes to form a majority, 270, have joined the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Background. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is meant to assure that the presidential candidate with the most votes nationally will be elected president. States joining the compact agree to award their electoral votes to the candidate who wins the national popular vote, regardless of the vote in their state. This ensures that the candidate who wins the most votes nationwide is also elected by the Electoral College, since a majority of electoral votes will go to the winner of the national popular vote. Currently, voters across the United States vote for president and vice president as a ticket, with the total number of votes making up the popular vote. In December following the presidential election, electors from the Electoral College vote for president and vice president. The U.S. Constitution gives each state the power to appoint their electors. The Electoral College has 538 electors. The total number of senators and representatives in Congress from each state and the District of Columbia. Colorado has 9 electors. Political parties choose Colorado electors. In order to win the presidency, a candidate must receive 270 of the 538 Electoral College votes. Colorado, along with all other states except Nebraska and Maine, awards all its electoral votes to the candidate who wins the state's popular vote. If no candidate receives a majority of the Electoral College votes, the House of Representatives choose the president, while the Senate chooses the vice president. The last time this happened was in 1824. There have been 5 elections which had different results between the popular vote and the Electoral College vote. The most recent ones were in 2000 and 2016, and the remainder were in the 1800s. The Colorado General Assembly passed legislation to join the Interstate Compact in the 2019 session. However, voters in Colorado have the ability to petition to review legislative actions. A petition effort gathered sufficient signatures to place this question on the 2020 ballot. This proposal commits Colorado to award its electoral votes to the candidate for president who wins the largest share of the national popular vote. It will only take effect when states with enough electoral votes, that is 270, to form a majority have joined the compact. Currently, 15 states and the District of Columbia, with 196 electoral votes, have joined the compact, and those numbers include Colorado. This measure will have no impact on the 2020 presidential election. So a yes vote means that you want to retain Colorado's participation in the National Popular Vote Agreement. A no vote removes Colorado from the National Popular Vote Agreement. So let's go to some questions on this one.
All right, the first one is, will popular vote still be awarded to the state even if they assume popular vote? I'm not sure I understand.
I'm going to
I
take
was saying when they do like the state colors, even if like let's say we go blue, but we go popular vote, national popular vote, we go red. When they are doing the assessments of each of the states, will we still assume our blue status?
you would vote for the winner of the national popular vote. And I noticed that I think I saw Steve Coddington on the line somewhere on the chat, and Steve was the one who did the research on this one. So I'm going to invite him to respond as well. And you don't forget to unmute yourself, Steve.
Cleaning staff come in, but that will be done in conjunction, hand to hand, in conjunction with the medical unit, so that everybody is protected and everybody is wearing appropriate PPE as they do these kinds of things.
Okay, the next question.
What do you think is the most misunderstood part of this proposal?
Well, speaking personally, when I first looked at it, I thought, the legislature passed this, what happened? And then I found out that the legislature had not included the safety clause, which precludes any referendum or petition gathering effort on the part of voters. And then I shouldn't tell you what my misunderstandings are because I don't want to confuse people. I think it's important to say that a yes vote will include Colorado's participation in the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact Agreement. A no vote removes Colorado from the National Popular Vote Agreement.
So is this proposition being proposed in other state ballots in the US?
I am not aware of any. The last thing I saw in print on that was in early August, and I did not see any other state mentioned.
So this was approved in the state legislature and this proposition is to shut it down? Is a question?
Yes, it's to omit the approval.
And there was a comment in about what was misunderstood, that it doesn't take an effect until other states join the agreement.
That's right.
Yeah.
Enough states that equal 270. And right now there is 196. And of course, we're undergoing a census right now, so that might shuffle things a bit. So keep that in mind.
So do we expect to see RCV on the Colorado ballot anytime soon?
I don't know. And RCV stands for, I'm spacing it, alternative kinds of voting, as I recall.
Do other states propose to pass the compact? Oh, I guess that's the same one, right? So they need 8 more electoral votes nationally to make this applicable?
No, they have to equal 270. Right now they're at 196.
My math was off. Sorry about that.
Ranked choice voting, thank you. RCV.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with it either, sorry. I should have been able to. So Bobby answered that Colorado would still be a blue state even when it voted for the popular vote choice, who is red. And then Jackie posted a map and, oh yeah, rank check choice voting. I think that might be all of them that were here.
Okay.
There was a question though from a couple people, if they haven't received their blue book, is there a way to get it? I was going to look to see if it was online as well.
It is online. It's on the General Assembly's website.
Okay, and then another question on 113, sorry, before we go on. Doesn't a yes on Proposition 113 approve the legislation?
Yes.
And someone just got their blue book today, so maybe they're still in the mail, in quotes.
And some of them go out by zip code. So that's kind of the way that's handled, and the same for ballots. So not everybody will receive everything on the same day.
And again, there's great conversation in the chat, so be sure to be watching there too.
Okay, so we move on to the 114. Reintroduction and management of gray wolves in Colorado. This is an initiated proposal to amend the statutes, and the major provisions are that it develops a plan to manage and reintroduce gray wolves to Colorado west of the Continental Divide by December 31st, 2023. And secondly, it uses state funds to assist livestock owners in preventing conflicts with gray wolves and to pay fair compensation for livestock loss. A little background. Gray wolves inhabited the southern Rocky Mountains for years until 1945, when the last one was killed in southwestern Colorado. Wolves evolved alongside their prey, such as deer and elk. Bringing wolves back will help restore this predator-prey balance, keeping prey and landscape they graze on healthier. Colorado is home to about 710,000 deer and elk, roughly 3/4 of which live west of the Continental Divide. There are presently about 2,000 wolves in the northern Rocky Mountain region and 4,000 wolves in the Western Great Lakes region. There have recently been confirmed sightings of gray wolves in Colorado. It is unclear if it is a self-sustaining population. If this proposal is approved, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission will hold statewide hearings about scientific, economic, and social considerations and include public input on updated plans. The commission would be responsible for wildlife management and regulation activities. They would work in conjunction with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife regarding any federal endangered species designation and would need federal approval prior to reintroduction of the gray wolves. So questions on wolves? Okay, let's move on to 115.
Sorry.
This measure, Proposition 115.
There is, sorry, Jerry, there is one question. Is there a consensus feeling amongst communities affected in Northwest Colorado?
Yeah, they don't want it.
We can still approve, but it needs federal approval too, is one other question.
That's what it says in the blue book. Yeah, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they're looking at the endangered species designation. And if that involves federal signing off on it.
All right, off we go. Next one.
Okay, Proposition 115, prohibitions on late-term abortions. This proposal would amend the Colorado statutes to prohibit an abortion after 22 weeks of gestational age of the fetus. It allows an abortion after 22 weeks when necessary to save the life of the mother. It provides for a criminal penalty for anyone who performs an illegal abortion and suspends for 3 years the medical license of a physician who performs an illegal abortion. Background. Current Colorado law allows abortion at any time during a pregnancy. Prenatal screening for genetic and structural fetal abnormalities are typically completed before 22 weeks. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that a woman has the right to choose to have an abortion before the fetus is viable. Further regulation comes from the states, which may regulate or prohibit abortions after fetal viability. The state law must contain exceptions for pregnancies that endanger the woman's life or health. The proposal defines abortion as any surgical or medication-assisted procedure performed with the intent to terminate a pregnancy. A procedure is not an abortion if performed with the intent to 1, save the life or preserve the health of the embryo or fetus. 2, remove a dead embryo or fetus caused by miscarriage. Or 3, remove an embryo or fetus growing outside of the uterus. There are only 6 other states and 5 countries in the world that permit late abortions. Questions on that one?
I don't see any questions. And we're running slightly behind time. So
Okay, let's keep moving then. Proposition 116, state income tax rate reduction. No, let me see. Hold on, I gotta move my pages. This proposal is an initiated amendment to the Colorado statutes. It has only one major provision, and it reduces the state income tax rate from 4.63 to 4.55% for all taxpayers on federal taxable income of every individual and corporation beginning on January 1, 2021. Background. The change from a progressive tax system to a flat 5% income tax for all taxpayers went into effect in the mid-1980s. The new income tax system resulted in large tax receipts for the state. These were diverted to Colorado taxpayers in the form of refunds through an initiated constitutional amendment, that is TABOR. It was approved by Colorado voters in 1992. The tax rate was lowered to 4.63% in the early 2000s by the legislature. Any change in the TABOR amendment or any new tax levied by Colorado governments must be approved by a vote of the people. If Proposition 116 passes, revenue to state government would be reduced $154 million in fiscal year 2021-2022, or about 1.2% of expected general fund revenue for that year. State income tax collections are the main source of general fund revenue, which is the primary source for financing state government operations. Currently, most of the money in the general fund is spent on healthcare, education, human services, and other state programs. Question on that one?
There's one question about how our economy is not in great shape and collapse. Can we reduce taxes when our country is in this state?
That
When
is
the
one of the
economy is
arguments against.
one of the arguments against. Okay. Who benefits the most from this cut?
Well, anybody that pays, who benefits the most? I believe the Blue Book identifies upper income voters, or taxpayers, I should say.
That's all I see for questions.
Okay, we've only got 2 more to go. Proposition 117, voter approval for certain fee-based enterprises. This proposal amends the statutes and it is an initiated proposal. Major provisions are that it requires voter approval for state enterprises which have or are projected to have revenues of more than $100 million from fees in the first 5 fiscal years, and combines the revenue collected for enterprises which are created simultaneously or within the preceding 5 years and serve the same purpose when calculating the amount of revenue. The background: the Colorado Constitution defines a state enterprise as a government-owned business which may issue bonds and receives less than 10% of its annual revenue from the state. It receives its revenue in return for providing a good or a service. This definition was included in the 1992 TABOR proposal. The Colorado, we're going into background. The state constitution defines a state enterprise. Oh, I'm sorry, I've already done that. Since 1992, the number of state enterprises has risen from 6 to 22. And the amount of enterprises funds grew from $742 million in 1993 to $17.9 billion in 2018. Enterprises range from examples such as the Division of Wildlife, which began in 1992. The higher education system of colleges and universities. The Colorado Lottery, and the Front Range Waste Diversion Enterprise, which began in 2019. All of these entities charge fees for services only from the persons using those services, and none of that revenue is treated as taxes that fund general services. These revenues do not count toward the TABOR revenue limit. Many counties and municipalities in Colorado also operate enterprises. This proposal does not affect those. This proposal will require a voter approval of any new enterprise that is projected by legislative fiscal personnel to receive fee revenue of more than $100 million in its first 5 years. If an enterprise actually receives funds in the first 5 years in excess of $100 million, it will have to get voter approval. After the first 5 years, it will not have to go to the ballot. If more than one enterprise is created, which serves essentially the same purpose, all of their funds will be added together to measure for the 100 million voting threshold. If passed, this legislation will go into effect January 1 of 2021. It will impact only the enterprises authorized after that date.
All right, so there was a question about who's supporting this measure.
The Independence Institute and Michael Fielding runs an organization called Colorado Rising or Action, something like that. And they have been active in this proposal, gathering the signatures.
So does 117 make Tabor more forceful in Colorado? Because right now enterprises and fees are how we make up some of the damage to our budget from Tabor, correct?
The argument on that one regarding Tabor is that, and this is from the opponents, is that Tabor's language on enterprises is doing exactly what it was intended. So that means everybody goes back to the ballot. And I see one, explain voter approval of enterprises. I assume that the legislature would have to come up with the proposal. The fiscal staff would have to come up with the projection of how much it would raise in the first 5 years. If it's more than 100 million, it goes to the ballot and we all vote.
All right, I think we can go to the last one.
Okay, last one, Proposition 118, Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. This is an initiated proposal to amend the statutes, and it creates a statewide family and medical leave insurance program and division within the Department of Labor and Employment. It provides partial wage replacement for up to 12 weeks a year for eligible employees taking time off for medical reasons or to provide care to family members, and it requires premium payments be split between employers and employees. The background, this proposal would create a state-run paid family and medical leave insurance program. Employees qualify to participate in the program if the employee has worked for his or her current employer for at least 180 days. Self-employed individuals may opt into the plan. Qualifying employees receive a portion of their regular weekly pay, not to exceed $1,100 per week for up to 12 weeks per year. Benefits are payable for an additional 4 weeks, that is 16 weeks total, to eligible individuals with a serious health condition related to pregnancy or childbirth complications. Benefits are paid on a bi-weekly basis. Qualifying conditions covered by the program include an individual's serious health condition, caring for a newborn child, an adopted child, or a child placed through foster care for the first year, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, circumstances related to family members' active military duty, an individual's need for safe leave due to domestic abuse, sexual assault, or abuse or stalking. Premiums are collected through payroll deductions, and the employer is required to remit the employer and employee contributions to the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Division within the Colorado Department of Labor. The employer and employee premium payments begin on January 1 of 2023, and premiums are split evenly between the employer and the employees. The initial premium amount is equal to 0.90% of the employee's wages in the program's first 2 years. Premium amounts beginning in 2025 will be set at an amount necessary to obtain the total percent of the cost of program administration. Premiums may not exceed 1 2/10% of an employee's wages. Employers with approved private family and medical leave plans are not required to pay premiums, provided the private plans provide employees with the same benefits and protections. The individuals and organizations that are not required to pay the entire premium include employers with 9 or fewer employees, but are required to withhold and forward an employee's portion of the premium. self-employed individuals, local governments that decline participation in the program, and employers that already offer approved paid leave benefits. And finally, employees taking leave are protected against discrimination and retaliatory measures by the employer, and upon return to work must be restored to the position held by the employee when the leave began, or be restored to an equivalent position with equivalent pay, employment benefits, and other terms and conditions of employment. And those are your 11 ballot questions on the ballot. Any questions, Pearl?
No questions on that one.
Okay. And I believe I'm supposed to go over who the position the league has on each of these. And I will do that briefly. Amendment B, that is the repeal of the Gallagher proposal, we support. Amendment C, conduct of charitable gaming activities. The league does not have any position regarding this issue, so no position. Amendment 76, citizen qualification of electors, we oppose. Amendment 77, local voter approval of casino bet limits and games. Again, the league does not have a position on this issue, so no position. Proposition EE, cigarette, tobacco, and nicotine products tax. We have a support on that one. Proposition 113, national popular vote. We have a support on that one. Proposition 114, the gray wolves. We have no position on that one. Proposition 115, prohibitions on late term abortions. The position is to oppose. Proposition 116, state income tax rate reduction, we oppose. Proposition 117, voter approval for certain fee-based enterprises, we oppose. And Proposition 118, paid family and medical leave insurance program, we have a support. And I want to thank the Rudy and Alice Ramsey Foundation for their support of the Ballot Issues Project. We appreciate their financial support of our efforts. And yes, that list is on the league website, as is a video of a ballot issue presentation, and you're free to use that any way you want to and sit down and review everything. It's basically everything we went over this evening. I put in a few side remarks, but the content is the same.
Thank you, Jerry. This has been great. Help us vote. And I just want to mention again that you can find the voters education part, which are the pros and cons, and the advocacy, which is whether we support or oppose or no position on both the League of Women Voters of Colorado website and the League of Women Voters of Denver website.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, all you people that worked on it. This was fantastic. Pearl Ann, whoa, how did you keep up on 7 things?
It was easy. This is a great group.
Well, the questions